everyone, and welcome to the Launch Gravy Podcast. I'm your host, Larry Weber, and on today's show, I'm going to be speaking with Amit Prakash. Amit is a CMO with a storied past in demand generation and growth, having worked at such companies as AWS, CloudFlare, and most recently, SurveyMonkey. Amit has a unique and valuable insight into how some of the world's most admired technology companies grow their customers and usage. Amit, welcome to the Launch Gravy Podcast.
Hey Larry, it's good to see you and thanks for having me. It's been a while.
It has. Great to see you as well. So I want to dive in quickly. We're taking a different approach lately and we're looking at different themes here. And for this session, you have a past in demand gen. And I want to be able to set the stage early on. Like, can you tell us from your own view, how you got into demand gen?
Yeah, totally, man. It's like a very interesting story which I get asked quite a bit. And it goes back all the way back to my grad school where I took this course on e-commerce marketing. I still remember IDS 518 at University of Illinois at Chicago. And there I learned about this whole very elegant concept of lifetime value of a customer and what is its relationship to the acquisition cost of any product. And that's where I learned, for a business to be successful, you need to have your acquisition cost lower than the lifetime value. And that concept like struck with me, and I've used it at so many places. And as digital technologies have grown, the ability to track customers acquisition and ongoing usage made it more and more interesting. And then as I started working, I started my career at like advertising agencies where I was able to apply it for a couple of businesses. And then most importantly, where I used it most was at AWS, at Amazon Web Services, where I built out the whole acquisition concept. And all it does is it you see what is the value a customer brings over a period of time. And that period of time is how long a customer on an average stays with your business, and then how much revenue or profits they bring over time. And then, like any successful business, you would want to spend less than that amount of money. And that's what we did at Amazon for their cloud computing business, AWS. And then as I kept working, I've seen different flavors of it. Like then when I left AWS, I went to Cloudflare, and then that's where we were doing expansion marketing, looking at existing customer base. How do we draw maintain their how do we have them adopt different products, make sure that they are retaining, and then they are buying different products. So that was a very different motion than what I did at AWS. And then there are different elements of it as well. There is self-serve where customers are coming in and signing up, and then there are sales involved or human involved businesses as well. So and there are different things which can get into it, but as you can see, how I got into this was from grad school, and then my passion for numbers and marketing, which what kept me. And that's where we met as well at AWS, where we did some amazing work both on the acquisition side and on the expansion side.
Yeah, no, totally. Super interesting. And like, just for our listeners, I want to bubble up some of the things you said, right? So on a demand gen front, part of it is getting new customers, bringing them in, and doing it for maximizing the amount of money you're putting in. You want more money coming back from sales and all that jazz. So part of it is new user acquisition. And then you mentioned another thing, engagement, and that's going to be existing customers. You don't want to forget about them. How do we get those existing customers to spend more, use more, become closer to the organization as well? And so I see those two motions there. Is there anything else that you would add to that, like between those two?
I would also add like adoption and retention. So like when
Mm-hmm.
somebody buys a product, like especially if we are talking about SaaS businesses, we have to make sure that they actually adopt it. And by adopt, I
Mm-hmm.
mean like meaningful adoption. So like let's just take a simple example. We worked at AWS. Let's just use an example of S3, which is their storage product, right? Like if somebody just creates a S3 bucket, they've adopted, maybe they put in like 2 files, but does that mean they're meaningfully adopted? No, we have to make sure
No.
that people are putting in like hundreds or thousands or millions of files based on depending on the size of the business. And that's where, as a business, you become successful. So that's the adoption part. And then the other part is the retention part, that you are not seeing churn, that you see these
Uh-huh.
customers, they stay along with you. And that's where, the lifetime value actually captures that element as well. Because if you see customers leaving, then the average tenure of the customer is going to be lower, and you don't want that to be lower. You want it to be longer and longer. And I got to do some very interesting work at at Cloudflare, sorry, uh, on a retention element. And you know what we were doing was we had put together like a monthly newsletter in which we would tell the customers like what is the value that Cloudflare bring to you on a month from the previous month. So how many
Hmm.
threats did we prevent? Oh, where is your traffic coming from? So that the customers could get a sense like, oh, is there a change in any trend? And you won't believe these some of these email newsletters became so popular that customers would actually tweet about them, and if we would be late by a week, like we would be getting emails from the sales team like, oh, my such and such customer is looking for that
Yeah.
email, are you guys delayed? So those two things are like very important as well, like retention and adoption as well. And
No, that's
and
great.
I know we talked about the sales team, but this is where like the customer success team also comes into play at a lot of companies, because they are the ones responsible for engagement and adoption. And I had the pleasure of working with a world class customer success team at Cloudflare as well.
No, awesome, awesome. You got me thinking when we were talking about that email that goes out to the customers and it was personalized to them, to their usage, and gives them insight. That it's basically you're giving them free intelligence about their usage and what's going on around them. It reminds me a little bit of a definitely yours is definitely going to be a lot more technically advanced than what I get from the energy company. I love it when I come in, they're like, "You, Larry, you are this more efficient than your neighbors." Or if it goes higher, then my wife comes and she wants to kill me. She's like, "Oh, why are we spending so much money?" And so I think that's great insight that from a demand gen perspective, you're offering information, you're offering assets to the end user, really focusing on that customer, I would say customer obsession in many ways.
Exactly. Like at AWS, we had this program called Trusted Advisor, and that is exactly what it was meant to do, right? Like we would, I was not part of the program, but it was one of the great things that the story in the company was like, how many, or in the industry actually, was that how many companies are out there who are going to call you and say that, hey, please come talk to us to lower your cloud bill, right? Like this is only
Yeah, yeah.
very handful companies who would do that, and we were trying to emulate some of that at Cloudflare as well. And I'm jealous of you, man. You get your energy bill and you're more efficient than your neighbors. I always get that my neighbors are efficient than me.
Yeah, no, no, no. It's yeah, we're pretty good about it, and I think it's harder when I think post pandemic you're using a lot more at home, and you're like you're spending a lot more time at in the house, and you're looking, but everyone else is too. So it's been good. Hey, I do have a question, a couple of questions here, just things that have come up in my conversations with people, and I'd love to get your take on it. And I see many times, yeah, hey, I'm working demand gen. I'm a demand gen person, or this is my field. But there's also the idea of growth marketing. And so, do you have an opinion on what's there's a difference between demand gen versus growth marketing?
Yeah, I honestly feel like there are a few terms floating around right now: growth marketing, revenue marketing, demand generation. And I feel like all are very similar. There is this also, there's another term, life cycle marketing. Life
Hmm.
cycle marketing is more about existing customer base, but I honestly feel like in my thesis is that they are all strategies to find how to grow the customer base, to get more customers, and then have those customers use more of your product. And ultimately, they are all after the same metric: how do we impact the revenue and
Hmm.
profitability? So, in my opinion, they are all the same. And I know some places it's a little bit of a title thing, but if people who are just trying to understand or look for a job, I would honestly go after all of them. And I think
Yeah.
revenue marketing is the latest term which I've seen, which I've started seeing in the last few months, but the job descriptions and what people do are pretty similar.
Yeah. It's like when they want the bottom line, revenue comes first and foremost versus,
Yeah.
hey, I have a demand for your product. That's a little different than making the actual money and the income for the
Yeah, like
organization.
for example, I don't know if you've heard of this company called Clary. Like they help
Uh,
in tracking revenue. So everything within their platform is like a revenue leak, and that's where I think some of that is coming. And I think it's fair, right? Like you don't want any demand gen person to just be like bringing in new leads or marketing qualified leads or opportunities. Ultimately, everybody cares is like the revenue. Like if there was a CFO right now in this discussion, he or she would be like, hey, tell me how much revenue we are getting. And I think that's the ultimate question. Like public companies are responsible on the Wall Street to report on the revenue, and private companies track that internally. So I think it's
Yeah,
all
yeah.
good.
Yeah, no, no, all good, exactly. So a couple other questions I have here. I wanted to ask you your opinions. Just things I've run into where at different companies, there's been different definitions of this, and there's different kind of I don't know wrangling with the sales team and demand gen and others. But can you tell me what is an MQL and how do you define it?
What do you mean? What is an MQL? MQL is an MQL. Just kidding, man. Just
No.
kidding. Yeah. Okay. Let's just do it like 101 on this thing. Like,
Yeah.
very simply put, MQL is a lead which has exhibited certain behavior or behaviors, or has taken an action which, as a business, which we've deemed important enough for a human or for a sales team to engage, right? Like humans come at a very high cost, so we have to make sure that we are sending them the right quality of prospects to engage with. And I'll give you some certain flavors because you said that low at every company is different. I'll also say that not only every company, like within a company as well, if they are trying to bring in prospects, they want to have a different bar. But when they're talking to existing customers, there's a different bar. Because with
Hmm.
existing customers, okay, they already have a contract, they know us, we know them. So typically the bar on the expansion slide is slightly lower on converting a lead to an MQL. So some of the examples, right? Like in certain programs I've seen, like, oh, if somebody just clicked on a particular email, that's considered an MQL. Or in some other cases, we were like, oh, somebody attended this in-person event and then they filled out this form and then they filled out a contact us form. Like there would be multiple hurdles, and typically how companies do it is like all of these would have like points, also known as lead scoring, and then it's
Hmm.
basically a summation of different actions. So if somebody says, oh, 10 points to click on an email, 15 points to attend an event, 10 points to fill out a contact us form, and then we'll have an MQL. And they all like have a number that they hit on from a lead scoring standpoint, and that's when it becomes an MQL. Does
Got
that
it.
make sense?
Yeah, no, no, totally. It's the idea I think where I don't know. I've run into situations where the MQL, like from a lead in general versus the MQL and how good, how quality is the MQL? What are those gates that marketing has to do to get it to the next level where a seller assumes, aha, this is ready to go. This is hot. And I've had conversations with folks in the past as well on you go to an event and you get a lot of garbage leads. And they're like, oh, this is an MQL. I had someone I gave a pair of socks to. They're a hot lead and it goes into sales. And they're like, what? The person's not ready to buy. And so it just making sure you have that clarity and cleansing within the quality of your MQLs of that. What's that threshold that it has to pass?
Yeah, and I think like very good point how you talk about like the sales team. And look, I've always had empathy for sales team. Like they have a lot going on, and one of the things that I have learned in my recent roles, as you bring up the sales team, is like I like to collaborate with them on understanding we are going to be sponsoring event X, Y, and Z. And let's align on why we are sponsoring events X, Y, and Z for a few reasons. First, we feel like the audience or the folks who are going to be there are going to be like our ideal customer profile. They are hitting 80 to 90% of our check boxes, and let's go there. And then the other thing we need to align is as a marketing leader or a demand gen leader or a growth leader or a revenue marketing leader that let's make sure that we are committing that we are going to have X number of people who are attending the event. And then we need to have a similar amount of commitment from the sales team as well, that, within X amount of time, and it can be 2 days or a week, that we are going to follow up with those leads who got there so that the lead is actually hot within that time.
Yeah.
And we are not calling them like 3 weeks later and the customer has been on 3 planes after that and has attended 2 other events. And they're like, what are you talking about? So I think having the right collaboration with the sales team on this event thing on from the get-go, like what are we going to sponsor? Why are we going to sponsor? And then I commit to bring these many people, and then you commit to follow up with those people.
Yeah.
And then also like to take one more step forward, that on an average, each opportunity is going to be Y number of dollars, right? Like, so we can do a little bit of an ROI even before going in, and having the
Mhm.
right expectation with with folks like myself, with the finance leader, that okay, if we are going to spend $100,000 sponsoring this event, we need to have like X times the number of pipeline depending on the comfort of each business, right? So that you ultimately you come out as ROI positive. Like I have seen going in like, oh, we're gonna spend $100,000 and we're gonna have a pipeline of $50,000. And I think as soon as you say that, people are like, what? And out of this pipeline, only a fourth is gonna convert. So like you're gonna get me only $10,000 in revenue by spending $100,000, and nobody likes that. Worse
Yeah.
is if you commit that, oh, we are gonna spend $100,000, we're going to have a pipeline of $1 million, and out of that, a fourth of that is going to convert. So revenue is going to be $400,000. So good, it's an ROI of 4:1, and it's a good standard to keep that. But one thing
Got it.
that I would like to caution on that is like many times, finance leaders or even us marketing leaders are like, well, but this was the pipeline that got generated in the initial first year commitment. So we again going back to my comment of lifetime value, right? Like let's not get stuck on like how much revenue we're going to get from a customer in first year. Let's look at long term, because we are here in all these SaaS subscription businesses. You are here on a multi-year journey. So even
Yeah.
if you can get to like a break even in first year, I think that's a big win, because if whatever you're going to get next year and also have them expand, is going to make you ROI positive. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, no, no, no. I think when you were talking, you got me thinking about like the T line, like time.
Hmm.
And you might, from a demand gen perspective, go out there and be, hey, here's what an expected rate of return's going to be. But if you get to the point that you're orchestrated, and man, I'm putting my product marketing hat on right now, where it's you need to build awareness, you need to build understanding, you will to build a little bit of the market, and then you're going out there to demand, right? There's different, I would say, variables at play, and there's a level of orchestration that needs to happen, right? And depending on the maturity of the organization, maturity of the product, and how much if it's a brand new product that no one even knows what it does, like database blah, right? I don't know why I even need that. That's a different issue than something that's already in market or there's already a defined need and there's a knowledge of that this product is going to service this need. So I think timelines as well, but you bring up something real quick where we're talking about the sales team and interacting with demand gen and kind of demand gen also interacting with other elements of marketing. And so maybe a question I have for you, you're kind of diving into it. What are all those different facets demand gen interacts with, right? Like where does demand gen sit within the organization from a collaboration perspective?
Yeah, totally. I feel like demand gen is the center of various go-to-market teams. First it's connecting the sales and the marketing team. And then within the marketing team, it connects with leaders like yourself with the product marketing organization, which so that we can understand, hey, who is the ideal customer profile? What is the pain point that this product is going to solve? How is it going to solve? Then you talked about lead scoring, MQL. So need to work with marketing operations to make sure we have the right tracking, we have lead scoring in place. And then let's not forget about friends in the product organization, right? Like we many times especially when we talk about adoption, retention, even like this term product led growth, like we need to understand what are the challenges a customer is facing in
Mhm.
adopting a product, and how can the product team work closely with us in removing those speed bumps for the product, for the customer, right? And it's not just for the PLG growth, but even for the sales systems as well, because we need to understand why did they build the product, and that is the story that we need to tell the customer as well. And then let's not forget about friends in the finance organization, right? Like a lot of it is like, how much budget do we have? Why do we need this budget? What is the ROI we are going to have? And many times, as the company's financial situation changes for both good or worse, oh, we suddenly have like $5 million extra to spend. Hey, DG leader, do you think you can activate this stuff in the next 2 weeks? So, as a DG leader, I'm always like ready with a list. Like, if the finance team comes and says, these are the 5 things that I'm ready to go do it, but then we also have to be careful. Can I really execute it in like 2 or 3 weeks,
Yeah.
and not wait? Or hey, we need to reduce budget, so always have like your bottom three things ready, that like these are nice to have things that we are doing, and we can reduce these to give some money back to the finance folks. So I think these are like the major players that as a DG leader I've worked with in the past, and I look forward to working with all of them. And all of these are some of my favorite people I've worked with in the past.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I think as you're talking, I'm jumping around different. When you and I worked at AWS together, it was a little different. Like from a demand gen perspective, you were very close with the finance team, and then I would work with them a bit. You would work with them a lot. I think from a product marketing and then product management side, I was like in the seat with product management coming out. And it's interesting. It led to the large organization, but smaller organizations I've worked at with, and even in different working as a CMO or working in other parts was all hands on deck. Demand gen's definitely in there and everywhere with the sellers, with product marketing and other areas. And so I think some depends on the organization you're in, the size of the organization, the mature of the organization. But I definitely think I agree with you that demand gen, similar to product marketing, needs to be everywhere and be
Mhm.
well educated on what's going on and who's who in the zoo kind of thing. Um,
Yeah, and I feel like you and I have both seen this. If product marketing and demand gen get on a slightly different track, we don't see great outcomes, right? Like we've both seen those things, and what's been great with working with you is like we've many times just, okay, let's get together in a room and let's get the train back on track, and that's why it's been amazing to work with you.
Yeah, no, likewise. I feel like we just stepped into doing marketing confessions, which could be another show at some point.
Happy to do that.
Not full disclosure, not everything works as expected. And full disclosure, things can get heated and that's okay, right?
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of it too is really getting an understanding of, who is responsible, who can help, and as all things, the more you work together, and I don't know, this is why I really like focusing these talks from in the trenches. It's not from something on high. Is in the trenches is where you really build the DNA. It's really where you learn, and you also that's where you fix. That's where like a lot of where things can go and derail are. And just I'm getting on my pedestal for a second. When you lead from afar, and you're not close enough to the details, that's where things go haywire quickly. And part of it is really understanding those mechanics, those nuances, like what is the ROI? What is finance doing? Does the product work? Does the product exist? Right. If you don't know all those things, that's a whole nother thing. But this is over communicate. And I think I'm overusing the term orchestration here. It's coming all together, getting over communicating, having that rhythm, having those discussions, and solving those problems together internally. I think my perspective that I think that's what's helped us too throughout the years and things that we've done and we've worked on.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So let's dig in here. The gist of this podcast really is around launches, right? And all different folks, not just product marketing, not just marketing even, but how do organizations, how do they bring products in the market? And a major piece of it, and that's why we're having this discussion today, is how do you build demand? How and what, where and when does demand gen involved? And we talked some of the metrics, ROI, things like that. But I would love to dig in with you, your perspective and your view, a real world view on some launches you've been a part of and from where you've sat. So I would love to maybe just pick one or not. Do you have one you want to bring up? Let's start picking it apart a bit.
Yeah, sure, sure, sure. Maybe we can pick something that we work together on. But before we get into it, why don't we first, like, for some of our audiences, let's talk about what are the very basic things which are needed for a launch to be successful, right?
Sure.
Like first is we need to have like, what are we launching, right? Like, is it a whole new product? Is it a feature? Is it a feature of a feature? Who is this launch going to benefit? Is it the same person or the same persona who's been using your core product, or is it different? The pain point and how does the product solve it? Because I think all of these things are very important. And then ultimately, the most important, are we ready to go GA, stands for general availability, on day one? Or is it like, oh yeah, we're launching a beta and we're going to have like 3 people try to use it, and we're going to call that as a launch. So it's just like a lot of these things depends, and that's what makes it very different how much of the ammunition you need to put in behind the demand generation and driving the awareness of that. And I'm sure you've seen this, I've seen this, and hundreds of our people watching us or listening to us have seen it as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, should we dig in into something that we?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on the point too is
Yeah.
and this is an interesting thing, and I think from where you and I stand sometimes, we can lose sight of it or we can forget about it, is that all different folks listening and organizations all across have different views on what a launch should look like and different views and even perspectives on, what it could look like. And look, you and I have run into situations where, sure, we have, is the persona really defined yet? No, it's just a product, and we need to launch it and start running. And sometimes you have to, and you have to figure it out. You have to build that plane while you're flying it, and you have to do that. Is that best practice? No, not always. And so the stuff you brought up, I think, is important. And I just to bring it up for folks is like, look, you need a persona. Who are you targeting? Do you understand your customer? Do you understand those pain points? And I think a lot of that hard work we can't forget needs to be done really before you do a launch, before you get out there and start driving this forward. And too many times I've seen folks do this haphazardly, right? Where it's, as you said, it's a challenge to drive these. But I really want to make sure that folks understand that there's an ability to get guidance, there's ability to build a plan, to stop, take a breath, make sure you're targeting correctly before you start spending like millions of dollars on advertisements that you don't know where it's going. So anyway, I'll get off my pedestal again there too. It's one of those things that we just want to make sure you walk before you run here a little bit and make sure you really understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. That gets into whole OKRs and metrics too later on. But anyway, I'll stop there. But let's look into, I don't know, pick a launch. What do you want to talk about?
Yeah, we can talk about document DB. Like
Oh,
we were both part of this great launch document DB at AWS, and I think it was a new product that they were putting together, and there were many elements to it, right? We are partners with some other company, and how do we deal with that? Who's the persona? But what I really loved about that launch was how we all got together, not just within marketing, within product. We defined the metrics, we defined the persona. We also looked at a few things that, okay, how can we bring in brand new customers to AWS? And then how can we look at existing AWS customers who can adopt that? And that is what made that launch really fun. And I remember we did a lot of A/B testing on messaging, on what are we going to write in the email, what is we going to be on the ad copy, and we learned. And then the best thing was we were tracking the metrics over time. Like the product team and the finance team, they had like very aggressive targets, and we were looking at how far are we off, and we would have to come up with like ways of how we are going to get closer to the target as soon as possible. So that's what made that launch very exciting. I still remember like some of my colleagues in the demand gen were calling this launch as, this is document DB is electric, and let's go behind it, and let's go make that happen. And I'm sure you had similar pressure from product marketing side as well.
yeah. Document DB was unique in the sense that we were offering a product, but it, we couldn't go too big because it was also let me put it this way. It was a MongoDB compatible database. So one of our partners, MongoDB, ran a database that kind of ran competitively to this database. So it was one of those situations where you wanted to make noise, you wanted to go drive, you wanted to go drive adoption, but you didn't want to kill the market. You didn't want to kill your partner. You didn't want to go do that as well. So it was actually a I would say threading a needle is the best way to put it, type of launch, right? So you had to really be smart about what you did, why you did it. And then there was different levels of the product's capabilities when it came out for, hey, it's a net new product. And then all of a sudden iterations of the product came out. There were new features that were launched over periods of time. And I remember as a part of that, really looking at, you think about a launch and the launch happening, right? It's you get ready for it to go. Okay, you prepped good launch. but it doesn't stop there. It continues on, and you have to make sure you have your editorial calendar prepared for those features that are coming. And that means working with you on demand, working with social to get things out there, working with our developer communities, working with our advocates to make sure these things, it's that rolling thunder. It keeps going on and on and on. And that's the kind of thing you got to think about when you do a launch. It's not just set it, forget it. This thing goes on for a long period of time, and those features become that rolling thunder initiative.
Yeah, and then let's not forget our dear friend SEO, right? Like bringing in free traffic. Like
Yes.
I think that is one of the most important things, because if you are not if your product or feature is not visible in key search engines, then how are people going to find you, right? Like, and you're going to end up paying a lot of money. So let's make sure you have the right landing pages and everything, and the right content built for that. And one thing I would say, I'm not going to get into the name of this product, like also having the right name for the product is so important. If the names
Mhm.
are not descriptive, people are going to be like, what did you all just launch? And I don't understand what it is. So
Yeah, oh yeah.
yeah, there was one thing which I'll never forget, which was always been a learning for me to make sure to push that, like even as a DG person, to push that on the product and the product marketing team why you're doing it, and at least do some due diligence. What does it mean? How is it going to be to get on rank top 3 or top 5 on Google or Microsoft search engine to make that happen? And
Yeah.
one more thing, like if we are ready to move on from document DB, like another interesting launch that I've been part of is like zero trust products at Cloudflare. Folks who are just tuning in, like I've worked at Cloudflare, and Cloudflare is a security company. They started as like basic core CDN DNS, but they've evolved a lot, and zero trust is one of their key offerings. And when they were launching a lot of their products like a couple of years ago in that area, the biggest challenge that we had was like it's a different buying center or a different buying unit. And people who buy CDN and DNS are not the same people who are buying zero trust products. And even within the existing customers, like we were having this challenge that, oh, we don't know who to go talk to. And then you have to go start buying these lists, this right title, and reaching out to them. So that's why like defining the ideal customer profile is super important to do that, even when you're just targeting your existing customer base.
Yeah, no, no, totally, and I think, geez, I almost want like a blueprint on a whiteboard that you and I can kind of start outlining this in front of everyone because it is important to really start making sure that these different I would call them variables, but I'm calling these requirements are completed before you go down the road of a launch, right? With the ICP or or looking at different personas, who we're targeting, why we're targeting, and then you brought up something too is I don't think I've talked enough about, or I haven't discussed enough, is name. And when you come to market with a name, how does that affect SEO? Will give you this one. I'll put myself out there in front of anyone, like this silly podcast, right? And like launch gravy. Well, I got to tell you right now, when I went out there, I started looking. It was all things about making gravy for stuff. I'm like, well, wait a second. I wasn't thinking through this, right? It's and so that's just one aspect of it. But when we would do naming for AWS was very good about this. You would actually spend a decent amount of time studying the market, studying like, should we come out with a descriptive name? Should it be an abstract name or it should be a reference name? All different things. And you get product managers work with product marketing to get a giant list together. And then as a team, you would go through and which ones sound the best? Which ones should we go with? And so there was rhyme or reason. I'm not saying all the directions we took were smart decisions, but we did try and look, document DB was a descriptive name. Why? It was a document database. That's what it was. Now, does that help you in SEO in certain aspects? Sure. In other aspects, you're going up against a behemoth like MongoDB, which owns a giant part of that market. That's another issue, right? Versus coming up with a name that's a little bit more abstract. I'll throw out there like Neptune, which Neptune was the graph database, right? And Neptune had more of that unique different name, or even Amazon Aurora, right? Which was referencing the Aurora. That was a pain in the butt because You think about, you do a search on Aurora, it's not the database, it's the Aurora Borealis, right? Aurora, a different type. And that's wicked. That's super popular. So then you run into those challenges as well. So all different things. I'm not saying anything was done
Yeah.
perfectly, but you have to be cognizant and aware so that you can actually make those different like changes as time goes on based on the decision you make.
Yeah, I think Larry, you're talking about products pre and post that situation that I was actually part of. Like DocumentDB was definitely in the post era where they had identified some issues with the names and they were having challenges. And then there were a few products which were launched, which were generic names, which were so hard to win, and even customers would come back and be like, I honestly do not understand what does this mean. So we actually had this instance, like you know how typical at Amazon it was like, oh, this is a Jeff Bezos fire drill. There was one AWS product name which got into that situation, and we had to quickly work on identifying why was this named as that, and okay, what should be the new name. And but in the whole thing of how Amazon is known for bias for action, right? Like speed matters in business, and how
Yeah.
quickly we changed the name of that one product, like it was done at lightning speed. And it was amazing how quickly we were able to do that.
Yes. Ha and this gets back to the whole idea of having executive engagement in the launch process as a part of this to enable better, faster decisions. Amazon gets a gold star in this. I don't think I've ever been anywhere that's been able to pull it off like Amazon had at that level, and it was mainly because the senior leaders were directly involved. But not every company is like that, so you have to have a sub-tier of executive approvals or others. You need at least to declare who's in charge, who is gonna
Right.
make that game time decision, and put that responsibility on that person. If you don't, that's where things get a little bit wishy-washy, and I don't know if we should do this, and it can get messy really, really quick.
Yeah, and then we just keep dragging out the launch by like months. I've seen like things just keep getting dragged out. Oh yeah, we think we should do it. Oh yeah, we think we should do it. Oh, and oh yeah, let's do it this way. Oh, let's do it that way. And it's just like nobody's making a decision. So yeah, you're right. And I think Amazon absolutely, it's no secret they have their leadership principles and it's basically in the DNA, and bias for action is there. And
Yeah,
ownership, like you talk about, we would get up to the most senior people at Amazon on getting this, and that's where like ownership, which clearly says that nobody says this is not my job, and people keep getting involved and make this happen.
yeah. And I'm not I don't want this to turn into a love fest for just Amazon, but one thing I will say is the vast majority of the company really lived and died by the leadership principles. And, that's really, I mean, yeah, I've been in other companies, they have things on the wall they say they do. Ah, totally not true, right? Oh, this is a great place for no. Amazon really kept true. And I will say that that's the importance with how they went into market, how they're able to talk to customers and hold that trust is all I've been in awe of that. Having been through it with you and seeing it, fantastic. It's a great experience that hopefully more people that go through the machine of AWS come out, or Amazon in general, and bring that back to the market because I think it's important for consumers to have that as well.
Absolutely,
S
absolutely.
so let I like, okay, so we talked through a couple of launches here. I do wanna talk through a couple of key things with you, like, not necessarily post-launch, but as a part of it. So one thing would be is I played in demand gen role a little bit, and I've had the ability to pull on the levers on different channels for different personas, and we dealt with a lot of developer things, a lot of builder mentality at AWS, and we actually later on, as we got more mature, we had more of the CIO, CXO, business leaders. Just your opinion, right? Do you have any, your preferences on what channels work better for what personas and thoughts around that?
Yeah, totally. When you're going like really after enterprise customers and you're going to have six figure, seven figure deals, then I think that's where it is a multi touch process of, okay, are we going to have an event? Are we going to follow up with them, with the salespeople? Are we going to have like account based marketing? Because nowadays there's a lot of buying committees where, oh, now it's not just the CIO or the database leader who's making, or the database administrator who's making the decision, but it's also the procurement team, it's also the privacy team. So, how do you reach out to all of them? So, it depends on the size of the deal and the product, versus on the other side, no, it's like a self-service product to enable like a chat bot on your website. Oh yeah, let's go talk to the marketing operations and the website people and the security team, and that's like a quick thing to get it done, and it's a quick implementation. So that's a different type of marketing, and then you also use different channels. So like for self-serve product, I like to focus on paid search, email, display ads, paid social, webinars, doing a lot of like tutorials versus having them like human element involved in that. So
Mm.
that's the difference I feel like. But at the end of the day, it may be like a six-figure, seven-figure deal, or like a five-figure deal, or like a low six-figure deal. In my opinion, you need to define success before you go into the launch. Like how we did it at like cases like DocumentDB or other feature launches at RDS and things like that. Like you need to define success, and then you need to have like weekly or monthly targets on how you are doing, like plan versus actual, and then be able to make changes. Because before you go in, like sure, you have like a playbook that, oh, I'm going to go spend this much money on paid search, this much money on paid social, this much money on
Mhm.
display retargeting. But you also need to evaluate what is happening in the market. Like, what if like people are not even searching for those terms, and you're not even able to invest that money on paid search? So what are you going to do?
Yeah.
So you need to quickly pivot and start driving awareness and do more like paid social and display ads to drive more demand into the search, right? Like,
Yeah.
or you feel like, oh, my SEO pages are completely broken and we are not ranking. So, okay, can we go and work with folks like you on the product marketing team and quickly get some content generated? Even though we both know SEO doesn't happen overnight, but hey, let's get started quickly to make that happen. So those are some of the things that I talk about like post launch, and take the learnings and keep going. Like I don't think anybody knows like a perfect formula before going into the launch, and then set the right expectations with all the stakeholders. Like, hey, this is how we are going, this is our expectation, and in 2 weeks we are going to come back, evaluate, and make changes as needed.
Yeah, I think a big part of it is making sure you write down ahead of time what it is you're gonna track and why you're gonna track it.
Yeah.
And we can change you can change based on what's happening in the market. You can change you can change the goalposts. I'm sorry, it can be done and you have to do it. You wanna make sure one person's not doing it without communicating it. This is where you need your chain of command to ensure that's allowed and that people are aware. But that's important to do so. One thing as you were talking through the launch and the different metrics you would think through. I I also there's different kinds of launches as well. And today we've been talking mainly around product launches, but we have also done thought leadership launches and things that are around we're gonna build a quote unquote launch to get awareness for a certain customer base. So I think one we did we worked on was specifically around getting more business leaders and more senior level folks to focus on things like databases, which that time not database in general, but like AWS was very developer focused. And how do we, how do we expand to really illustrate to larger leaders, oh my God, this is how much money you can save by migrating over. And there wasn't a lot of awareness on that. So part of it was how do you build awareness to those other personas, those business leaders, but also get awareness in general. It's in that thought leadership piece. So I think that's important too, because that's going to be a different type of metric you're going to track than the PLG, try more, buy more, where and those other ones, I've always felt education and tutorials, if done correctly, are some of the most powerful types of assets you can have, right? That allow to
Absolutely.
increase your revenue, right? And your usage.
Absolutely. They all work together, and like this whole concept of like brand to demand, like they're all very important, and you need to drive brand awareness with the right audience. Like cost, efficiency, how fast your thing works, and why is it important. Like many people like, oh yeah, I need this database to query faster. But why? Like you need to be able to explain it to them and help them understand that if it's not done at this speed, your business can suffer and you will not be able to give like a good experience to your customer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Question for you, and we're talking around goals and what do you study? What are those metrics? And sometimes it's been a challenge to get buy-in, to get others in the organization to agree or align on those goals. And do you have any tips or tricks and things that you, because I remember working with you, you were always darn good at getting alignment on goals. So I didn't know if you had an opinion on kind of what was your secret sauce on getting alignment.
On getting alignment on goals. I think like what my secret sauce is like starting early and bring everybody together. And one example I'll give you is and don't be shy on going and quote unquote inspecting how somebody has come up with a goal. Like, I'm not like saying that finance teams sometimes can use different assumptions which are away from reality, but I've seen it in the past, like sales team or finance team, or even within marketing team, right? Like if somebody is responsible, like one example I'll give, I was in a situation where somebody took the enterprise annual contract value, also known as ACV,
Mhm.
like they applied it to the whole customer base when we knew that 60% of the target audience was SMBs, and the SMBs would bring in like half of that value. And when I looked at it, I was like, there is just no way we can do this. And a lot of people thought I was like not being nice and was just questioning. But I was like, look, I'm just telling you the reality. It is not going to happen. And like at the end of that call, all the salespeople, finance people were thanking me that, oh, thank you for bringing that up because we were about to set up like 100 people up for failure, like marketing, sales, product, and everybody would have been like felt so bad throughout the year if we would have taken this target. So it's that thing, and I don't do it like to just call somebody out. It's just like let's think through this, and I like to take some time and start early versus trying to do it like the night before.
Yeah,
Yeah,
always. Yeah.
because
No,
these
no.
things don't come up um like I can come up with all of the assumptions suddenly. Like you need to think through it. Like, oh, it was like a launch which we were trying to do with an existing customer. So I was like, okay, what is the existing customer base target that we have? So if we had say like 100,000 customers, we can only like the ideal customer profile is only like 30% of that. So that gives you only 30,000. And out of 30,000, 50% are SMBs and 50% are enterprise. So you can't use the same thing. And let's, with that, build up with it. And then also, like, to our sales friends, like there was assumptions like, oh, suddenly we're going to change the conversion rate from X% to Y%, and Y is like 30% higher. And I'm looking at the sales folks and like, oh, this model assumes that on January 1st, you will be converting 30% higher. Is that true? And they were like, no, that's going to take up some ramp up time. I was like, okay, so that needs to be built up into this. So those are the ways. That's the tricks and trips. Like let's bring everybody together and sure we can have some aggressive targets, but also let's keep things real.
No, that's logical and makes sense. And
Yeah,
you just need to be better. I don't know if you see something, say something, and also do things
exactly.
early. Yeah, yeah. I've had a dime for every time you're doing this in the very
Yeah, I
end or the last
always
minute, right?
we talked about Amazon. So like I always remember one of the shareholders' letters from Jeff Bezos that you cannot do a handstand on in one night. And he had written this in like a shareholder letter. I think it was like 2015 or 2016. If you Google it, one night handstand Jeff Bezos, it will come up. Or like another thing was from I had read this book. How did Steve Jobs get ready for the keynotes for like iPhone launches and things like that? Sure, you and I are not launching iPhones, but that the main premise was like you need to spend X times then the keynote time that you're going to be on the stage to get ready and make sure that every word that you're going to you're going to say is vetted like multiple times and you feel good about it. So it's just like let's spend time, let's not try to do it overnight.
No, that makes sense. Makes sense. Hey, I just looked at the time and I think we're up here. In wow, it's been awesome having you on it, and I feel like we can keep going on a lot of these different areas. I I do wanna ask you one last question and to leave the listeners with is from a demand gen perspective, from just your experience and being launching products, being part of this, any tribal knowledge you would share and say kind of if more knowledge you haven't covered already that you want to share with our listeners on this space?
Instead of adding something new, I think I'm just going to repeat a few things. First is understand what is the launch, understand the ideal customer profile, because if you reach the wrong people, you're not going to be successful doing that. The last one is metrics. It's very important to understand on the metrics and how you're going to track them. If you want me to repeat, I'm going to repeat the three things again. First is customer profile. Secondly is come up with the metrics that you're going to go after. And third is set right expectations on what we are going to be able to get to.
No, that makes sense, and it gets back into have a plan, over communicate, align on goals, and make sure darn well you know who you're targeting and why, because otherwise, woo, it could be a hot mess real quick.
All
Hey,
right.
Amit, thank you so much for being on the show. And yeah, if anyone wants to get out in touch with you, like LinkedIn is probably the best way.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'll have your LinkedIn in the show notes, and we'll go from there.
All right.
Anyway, Amit, thank you again, man. Take care.
Thank you so much, Larry. Pleasure.